So, have you heard about this film, The Substance? Everyone's talking about it, and it sounds pretty wild.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten some buzz, and for good reason.
It's that new film from Coralie Fargeat, the director behind Revenge, which was,
Intense.
yeah, definitely intense. And this one, The Substance, seems like it's on another level.
What's really got people talking is how it blends genres. Kind of
Yeah.
like sci-fi, body horror, that kind of thing.
Right, it's not just a straight horror film, it's got layers.
Exactly. It's being called insane, freaky, one of the most insane movies ever seen. People are really responding to it.
One reviewer said it was like David Cronenberg in a blender. I mean, talk about a visual.
That definitely paints a picture. It sounds like Fargeat's really going for a visceral experience.
Yeah, and speaking of unforgettable, we have to talk about Demi Moore. Her performance is generating serious Oscar buzz.
Absolutely. She's getting incredible reviews. One critic called it a powerhouse turn, said she leaves it all on the line.
Wow, that's high praise. So for those who haven't kept up with all the hype, what's the substance about?
So Demi Moore plays this aging actress who feels the pressure to stay young, which, let's face it, is a huge issue in Hollywood.
Oh, absolutely. Especially for women. It's like there's this impossible standard.
Exactly. And she ends up going for this, let's say, unconventional procedure involving a substance that promises to restore her youth.
Okay, I can already see where this is going. It wouldn't be a Coralie Fargeat film without a twist.
And a major twist it is. This procedure results in a younger version of herself, played by Margaret Qualley, emerging.
Double trouble. But something tells me it's not a fun, lighthearted kind of double trouble.
Definitely not. It gets really interesting because the film doesn't shy away from those complex emotions surrounding aging, especially for women in Hollywood.
Right, like the pressure to stay relevant, the fear of being forgotten, all of that.
And it explores those anxieties in a very visceral way. One review I read called it a grotesque masterpiece, which, isn't exactly a typical compliment. But in this case,
Kind of fits?
yeah, it sounds like Fargate is using body horror not just for shot value, but to really get under our skin and make us think about these issues differently.
So we've got this blend of sci-fi, horror, and social commentary all wrapped up in what sounds like a visually stunning but pretty disturbing package.
That's one way to put it. One scene that's getting a lot of attention involves these prawns. And from what I've read, it's both inventive and deeply unsettling.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Before we get into those details, though, I'm curious, how effective is the body horror, and how does it actually connect back to the deeper themes of the film?
Well, it's like Fargate uses the body horror as this, visual metaphor.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. Because we're talking about a woman so obsessed with youth that she undergoes a procedure that literally transforms her.
Exactly. So those physical changes, they become like a reflection of her internal struggles, those anxieties about aging and beauty standards.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
And it's not just about the external transformations, but also the psychological impact, like that prawn scene, for instance. It's supposed to be really unsettling, showing this kind of gradual loss of self.
It's like the substance is as much about the horror we feel as what we see on screen, right?
Yeah, you get it. And that's where having both Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley becomes so crucial.
Because they represent those different facets of womanhood, right? Like those different relationships with age and the pressure to conform.
Exactly. And, it's interesting because some reviewers called the film feminine, but not necessarily feminist.
I saw those reviews and I wasn't sure what to make of that distinction. What do you think they meant by that?
I think it has to do with the film's exploration of internalized misogyny.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, you see how women in the film, especially in Hollywood, internalize those societal pressures, those impossible beauty standards, and then sometimes perpetuate them.
Right, like those competitive dynamics that can exist between women. It's almost like the film is holding up a mirror to that.
And you've got Demi Moore representing like an older generation of actresses who were often objectified, valued primarily for their looks, and now they're grappling with an industry that's moved on.
And then you have Margaret Qualley as this younger actress, almost embodying the image that Moore's character is desperately clinging to.
It becomes this really unsettling power dynamic.
Adding a whole other layer to the horror.
Right, because it's like the film is saying, even if you could turn back the clock, those societal pressures, those insecurities, they don't just vanish.
It's almost like the real horror is internal. It's about the monsters we create within ourselves and the systems that feed into those anxieties.
Exactly. And speaking of creators, we have to talk about Coralie Fargeat. I mean, this is only her second feature film, but she's already making waves.
Revenge was such a powerful debut, so to see her following it up with something like The Substance, which sounds even more complex and ambitious, it's exciting.
She's definitely not shying away from pushing boundaries.
So how would you say her style has evolved from Revenge to The Substance?
Revenge was very much rooted in the exploitation genre, using those tropes to deliver this really powerful message about, female empowerment. The substance, though, it feels like she's taking on a more complex narrative, weaving together the sci-fi, the horror, the social commentary, to create something that's both visually striking and intellectually stimulating.
It's like she's not content with just staying in one lane, and that's always exciting to see in a director. But speaking of not holding back, what can you tell us about the ending of The Substance? Because knowing Fargeat's work, I doubt it's a nice, neat resolution.
One reviewer said the finale was deliriously over the top. They even compared it to like the prom scene in Carrie, but with, Fargeat's signature blend of gore and those unsettling visuals.
Oh, wow. I'm both intrigued and slightly terrified.
They specifically mentioned a New Year's Eve party that descends into total chaos,
Yeah.
which sounds like a pretty clear visual metaphor for everything the film's been building towards.
Okay, now I'm really starting to get a sense of the film's tone. But for all the intensity and potential for gore, I also read that there are moments of dark humor sprinkled throughout. I'm curious how that fits into the mix.
Well, it's interesting because it speaks to Farkeet's, control as a filmmaker.
How so?
It's like she can balance those really dark, intense moments with these hints of humor,
Yeah.
and it actually works.
Yeah, it doesn't feel out of place or disrespectful to the serious themes she's exploring.
Exactly. It's more like finding the absurdity in the midst of all the chaos, which
Yeah.
can be, its own kind of release.
It's like a pressure valve, right? Letting off some steam without losing that sense of unease.
Right, because ultimately the film isn't shying away from those tough questions, about aging, about beauty, about the lengths we go to for validation.
It really makes you wonder, what would you do if you had access to this substance? Would you be tempted?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, haven't we all had those moments where we wish we could just erase a few years, turn back the clock a bit?
Right, but then there's that nagging feeling at what cost?
Exactly. And I think that's what makes the substance so effective. It gets under your skin, makes you confront those desires and anxieties, and I bet those questions linger long after you've seen it.
So for anyone listening who's looking for a film that's, well, a little more than just popcorn entertainment, this sounds like it's worth checking out.
Absolutely. It's a conversation starter, a film that'll stay with you.
Well, I know I'm adding it to my watch list. Thanks for the heads up. This has been a fascinating deep dive.
Anytime. Always happy to talk Fargeat. She's a visionary.
That she is. And for everyone listening, until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.